Welcome to Xavier University for the 10th annual Ann Binger Catholic Speaker Series. Our topic, Creating We Education. When the leadership team from the Center for Catholic Education came to me and said, we want the topic to be Creating We Education, I thought to myself, why do we want something about a video game? Now, I noticed that all of you didn't laugh, so you're going to have to run that by your students because they'll explain that to you. So they responded, not that kind of we. Well, my name's Dr. Mike Flick. I'm the director of Xavier's Center for Catholic Education. The Ann Binger Catholic Speaker Series is made possible by a generous grant from the Clement and Ann Binger Foundation. This room is filled with a lot of great teachers and educators from Catholic schools. You are teachers in the most successful, the most envied, and the best education system the world has ever conceived. Here's a few fun facts about Catholic schools. About 2.1 million students attend Catholic schools in the United States. The student-teacher ratio in Catholic schools is 14-1. 99% of students who attend Catholic high schools graduate. Of those, 88% attend four-year colleges or universities. Currently, 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices went to Catholic school. Minority populations account for 30% of Catholic school enrollment. 15% of Catholic school enrollment is by non-Catholics. And the mean cost per student in Catholic schools in the United States is $5,436, where the national public average is $10,792. Catholic schools are saving a huge amount of taxpayer money. To sum it up, Catholic schools are about academic greatness in a safe, faith-based environment. A quote from Frederick Koenig comes to mind, especially at this time of the year with Thanksgiving. We tend to forget that happiness doesn't come as a result of getting something we don't have, but rather recognizing and appreciating what we do have, our Catholic schools. Most of us in this room are Catholic educators, and what I'd like now is to see a show of hands. How many Catholic educators or employees of Catholic schools are in this room? Okay. How many of you have been to one of the other Ann Binger Catholic Speaker Series programs? Very good. We're Catholic educators and proud of it. Our daily work makes a tremendous difference. You are part of the greatest school system in the world. So I want to hear all of you say it. We're Catholic educators and proud of it. Ready? I can't hear you. I want it louder. We're Catholic. So on behalf of the Binger Foundation and Xavier University, now that you're all awake, welcome. And it's my distinct privilege to introduce to you Bishop Joseph Benzer, a good friend of mine, and he's going to get us started off right with a prayer.
Thank you, Dr. Mike. If I can call time out for 1 second, because before I was ordained a priest, I was an usher in church. And I see a bunch of people standing back over here. There are plenty of seats. If this is the 50-yard line, from the 50-yard line to the goal line on this side of the room. So, in fact, some of the seats I see, there's 2, 4, 6, like 8 together. So please, there's plenty of spots. We want everybody to be comfortable. Not shifting their feet, not leaving early, right? Amen, stay to the end, so that we can learn as much as we possibly can. And then there's 5 seats kind of right here in the middle, 3 rows in the front. These are like the diamond seats at Great American Ballpark, except no one's going to come and serve you food. You've had that already. And if you have a seat near you, why don't you raise your hand so people can see? Raise your hand like the teacher can see it. We even have some in the front row. We're going to take up the collection about 5 o'clock, okay? Thank you, thank you. And let us bow our heads as we pray. Good and gracious God, on this the feast of the presentation of our Blessed Mother, we celebrate someone who continues to be a wee person in our lives, Mary. Because of her great yes to the angel Gabriel and to your call in our lives, we have a chance to celebrate our Catholic faith today and to place our faith in Jesus Christ. And today we remember Ann Binger, who a little bit more than a year ago passed into eternity, and her sacrifices and her desire to be a wee person too, such that we are able to come together and celebrate and to learn and to realize the great gifts and talents that each one of us has, and to be able to share those talents with others, especially the children in Catholic schools. And so we ask you to bless us this afternoon. We ask you to bless all teachers, administrators, students, parents, and volunteers, so that all of us might grow in wisdom and understanding before you. And we pray these things and all things through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you.
Wouldn't you know that the bishop said something about leaving early? Because as you can see, I'm not exactly dressed for the wedding here. I've got something else that happened to come up across campus, not worth going into, but it was one of those kinds of things that made me think, boy, it'd be really nice to have the gift of bilocation, you know. I once prayed for that gift of bilocation. What I got instead was tears, so just didn't quite work out. I'm Mike Graham. I'm the president here at Xavier, and it's a pleasure once again to welcome you here again this year. A lot of newcomers in the audience today I saw earlier, so welcome. It's good to have you here for this, your first, but our 10th of these series. It's a really wonderful opportunity, I think, to come together as people who are of faith and who do faith in the schools in which you serve, touching the lives of the students who are given to your care, and through them really touching lives, futures, worlds, really, that you will never see or never know short of the revelation of the kingdom where all is made manifest. It's a brilliant, brilliant thing that you and I are given to do, really, in our own separate ways. But all of us being able to come together at an event like this, grateful to God for the vocation that has been given to us, and eager to find ways of making that vocation ever more effective in the world. This is really a way for us to say thank you for what you do. Now can we all figure out how together we might do it even better, more fully at the service of God's people. And so welcome. I hope you have a really wonderful time, and I look forward to welcoming you to events like this going into the future. So thank you very much.
My name is Mike Stabile, and I'm on the faculty here at Xavier University, and it's my pleasure to introduce Judith Glaser. And before I do that, I know that all of your time is valuable, and obviously you've had a full day today, and you're here for a lot of different reasons. But we want what you're going to have to see and hear today and to feel and experience to not just be informational, but to be transformational. And I can almost guarantee that it will be transformational. But let me give you a little background. A few years ago, I was in a bookstore, and my wife knows I love a bookstore. I love to go in, and I get lost in books. And I happened to be in the leadership aisle, and I came across a book called The DNA of Leadership. Now, I have a workshop that I use that has that same title, so I was intrigued by the title, but I was not familiar with Judith. And so I picked it up, and I started to read, and I couldn't put it down. And from that point on, I was hooked. And not only that, I started applying not only the principles, the concepts, started putting them to the teaching here at Xavier, as well as what I do in consulting and some of the other things, and many of you are familiar with that. And then I came across, because obviously there's a book called Creating We, and in this Creating We, I started using a lot of the terminology from that. And I fell in love with the ideas and thoughts. You know, there's authors that will capture your thinking and your mind. There's authors that will give you some practical examples of tools and things to do, but there's also authors and people that put all three together when they just inspire you, and that's who Judith is. So I'd highly recommend, we do have a few copies out there of these books, but it wasn't until a few years later, 2 years later, that I was at a conference on the campus of UCLA, and I came into this young lady, Judith, at the conference, and we just happened to start talking and talk about conversational intelligence. Judith has a client list that's like a who's who's. Everybody from entertainment, the entertainment industry, to Wall Street, to clients that are CEOs, to international across the world, in every type of industry you can think of. But yet, she was interested in me. She wanted to know about me. And that impressed me. So we had into a conversation, had some breakfast together, went on with the conference, and about halfway through the first day, it hit me that this is the same person that I've been reading about and from these concepts and principles. So some of you have heard this story. During one of the breaks, this big Italian comes out with his hands like this, waving at her and saying, "Judith, I got to talk to you." And I know she probably thought I was a little crazy. Well, some of you already think I am anyway. But it was that embracing of that, from that particular point on, that we started a relationship of being able to think and work together, and really it's been transformational. And again, you can read her bio. You can read the things that she's doing. She's been on ABC, NBC, ABC. She's Wall Street Journal. She's Huffington Post. All these things that are going on. But yet, she is a very authentic, transparent person. She walks the talk and talks the walk. And that's the type of person we want to have here, because I think that best represents who and what you want to hear today. So it's my pleasure to introduce Judith Glaser, who is not only an excellent person, but a person who I consider a friend, but more than that, a mentor of mine. So, Judith.
First, I have to find out if we can have fun together today. Is that okay? Cool. Cool. It's a time of day where you need a little fun in your life. Okay. I was sitting here trying to understand why my heart felt so good over the last hour, actually over the last 2 days since I've been with you, Mike, and enjoyed all the people that I've been meeting with. And my heart, how many of you know that the heart and the brain are connected, and that the heart is actually part of the heart-brain system, and that you need your heart to be active in order to be great thinkers? How many of you have heard that before? So by the end of today, those who haven't raised your hand are going to hear a little bit more about this, because the fact that my heart warmed up made me start to think about all of you in a completely different way than I would have. Normally, an audience this big is scary. You know, how many times you get to sit in front of an audience this size and chat with them and hope that you say something that is of value to them. It doesn't happen in a lot of people's lives. And here I'm sitting there getting warm. So I have to share with you, I said, so self, why am I feeling so good beside the great welcome that I got? And part of it was because I went to a Catholic school. My school from K through 8th grade was a Catholic school. Now, I was the only Jewish girl, or one of 3. So, but, you know, I felt really good there, and I had a lot of fun there. And I was brought up into being a really good kid. I thought, I mean, that has a big influence on your life. And now I'm sitting here realizing after the 2 events, and now this one, why I felt so good. I got a lot of good upbringing, yeah, that I've taken forward. And so maybe you'll see in here some of the things that you are all about, because I really believe that this university is absolutely extraordinary. Now, I had to learn to say Xavier, not Xavier, right? Yeah, I got corrected. But I'm just so thrilled to be here. And what I want to do, first of all, I have to do something, which I promised, which was to take a picture of all of you. So do you mind doing me a favor? Can you give me all a big smile? This is one of those, right? I want everybody to kind of do a big smile there. Can you do that? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. Did you smile? That group didn't smile over there. I saw that you didn't smile. Can we do that? Come on, do a smile on this side. Cool. How about this side? You pretended to smile. I want to do a smile on this side. You got it? Cool. Okay. Why did I do that? Besides, I said I was going to have fun with you. Because human beings make snapshots of all the interactions that they have with other people. Because that's how we create a world inside of us. In order for us to be different from animals, we need to make those snapshots. We need to take them in and make our movies. And then we need to carry around those movies in our world. And part of what we do, spend time every day doing, and you'll learn about it in our talk today, is that we use those movies and confirm what we know. Because as we confirm what we know, we feel validated. It validates the knowledge that we've created, and it gives us confidence to move forward and do the things we need to do in the world. The next thing we do is defend what we know. How many of you have noticed that there are times during the day when you're interacting with people that you are really on your horse about what you know and you're defending what you know? How many people have done that in their lifetime? Now, if everybody's hand isn't up, I don't think you're really being legitimate with me today. The one thing that we need to learn how to do, because our brains have evolved to be extraordinary. We are not animals, although we carry part of the animal world in us. But our brains have evolved to be creators and co-creators of the world. I had the good fortune as an organizational anthropologist to be on a 6,000-year-old Neolithic site. It was a dig where I got to go back when people weren't anything like what we are today. There were no inventions except for the one that we happened to find on our plot of land. Our Americans were given 10 feet by 10 feet in a plot that was going on for 25 years, an excavation of Neolithic site, nomads. And we found the only innovation at the time, which was a pot-belly stove. Imagine where we are now today and where they were then. And so the world is evolving to go from where we were as nomads and animals into something extraordinary, where humans can access wisdom in their life and can bring out wisdom in other people. With that framework, I started to do the work. But let me take you into the work a little bit deeper. And I'd like you to be willing to listen and open up. And I want you to practice part of conversational intelligence is listening to connect. Listening to connect is not listening to reject. It's not listening to wait until you're going to get your piece in. It's not listening to be trying to sell your ideas. Listening to connect is opening yourself up to know that part of that connection is going to be a heart connection that actually happens before you open your mouth. We now know that hearts connect together in 0.07 seconds. So if I walk in within 10 feet of you, my heart is already reading your energy, and I'm deciding whether I want to interact with you. And I can feel whether you're a friend, or I can feel whether you're a foe. Now, some people think this is woo-woo, so I want to ask you, is this woo-woo? No, you believe this, right? Good, good. So I can keep going on? Yeah, I don't have another presentation, so I hope you like it. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is how to better understand this extraordinary capacity that we have as human beings, and to see how that relates to what you do every day, whether it's with family, friends, students, children, people at work, your colleagues, or other people that you want to be involved with in some way. And I'd like you to come out thinking about the influence that we have on each other every minute, because what I've studied is that interaction at the moment of contact. At the moment of contact, that minute, that second, that word that you say can have an influence on a person's life and give them a trajectory of greatness, or it can cause them to stop in their tracks and not grow again. And I want you to understand it, not grow again. We have the ability to close down people's minds so that they live in the only world that they know from inside. And we have the ability to open people's minds to something great. And I hope today that you'll begin to find a place that affirms what you're already doing that's great and gives you an opportunity to look at other things that you can be doing to open the minds, hearts, and spirits of the people you come in contact with. So the story here is not clicking. So my light's on, but it's not moving. So we're going to try something else. It's in a freezing mode, by the way. My technology people, can I start this over again, you think? Now, my amygdala should be firing off like crazy right now. Yeah, it is. Can I get some technical help? It went back. No, I did that. I did that to get it to start again. So we have a... I got it. This isn't working anymore, but I got it, thank you. Okay, here we go. I hope you were on my side, giving me the right energy to make that work. That's why, right, yes, it's a team. Okay, all right, here we go. So what we're looking at is to get to the next level of greatness depends on the quality of the culture we create, depends on the quality of the relationships that we create, which depends on the quality of conversations that we create. Everything happens through conversation. Everything happens through conversation. And so what I want to do is bring you together for an experience of what it feels like to go from I to we. I've never done it with an audience this size, so you're going to be my experiment. And part of what we talk about in conversational intelligence is that in order to move to that next level of greatness, we have to be experimentors. That is mentors of the experiment. That means that we try things sometimes, whether they succeed or fail, but we know that if our heart tells us and our mind tells us some things we need to try to experiment with. So now you're going to be my big experiment. Okay, ready? This is having fun together. All right, so what we're going to do is this. I am going to ask you to read what's up here. And everybody, I'd like you to learn how to just read this, what I show you together. So I'll show it to you first. I'll tell you what it's, well, you'll tell me what it says. And then I'm going to ask you to read it together as one voice. Okay. Ready? Okay, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and when you see it, read it. That was pretty good. Did you say you read it as one voice? You like to do it? Some people think you could do it a little bit better. Okay, let's try it again. This time with one voice, because our goal is to become one, is to become a we with one voice. So let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. Can you read this? Better? You even had the sis together. Good? Good enough because I'm taking you on the next lap with me. Okay? All right. Now that you can do that, what I reveal next, I'd like you to do the same thing. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, and I'd like you to read it together with one voice. So at the end, in the middle, from the beginning, as soon as you can do it, you become one. Take a deep breath. I'd like you to go inhale, and then outhale. Okay, here we go. How did you do? Pretty good, huh? Okay. What some of you may have not heard, which I heard from up here, is that the groups started to form subgroups. Did any of you experience that over there? Right. So that you start to connect with the people that are closest to you, and you begin to tune into them. Part of what we know is that human beings are connected at all times. Even if we're not talking to each other, we feel the energy of another human being around us, and we need that energy. When human beings are rejected, something happens in our brain that closes us down. And we want to get close to the people next to us. So there's something about that voice that pulls us in and makes us want to be whole with another person. So I'd like to take you into some of the experiments that I started to do when I was very young that got me into this field. And let me get my... what we now know is that conversations shape our reality. We now know that human beings connect, and as they connect, they will either open each other down, close each other down, or open each other up. We now know also that as we have conversations that feel good, it begins to open up a sense of trust with another person. We now know from the research in neuroscience by quite a few neuroscientists that trust lives in the prefrontal cortex heart connection. The trust doesn't just live anywhere. And we also now know that distrust lives in the lower brain, or the amygdala, or the reptilian brain. If that is the case, that means that when we meet people that we don't trust, We close down automatically if we feel that we can't trust them. And if we meet people we trust, we open up. It also means that because trust and distrust can take place at the same time in us, that we can live in uncertainty frequently. How many of you have ever lived in uncertainty? Right. And more so every day as the world changes faster than we can keep up with. Do you know that there are more words that have been invented in the English language in the last 2 years than in the history of the world? So imagine conversations and how we're trying to really make sense of what's going on as we speak with people and adding meaning. Isn't that kind of amazing phenomena? Okay, so what does all this mean? So what happened is that I want to take you into what opens us up and what closes us down, and bring you into one of the biggest conversational experiments I have ever made. And that was when I was much younger, the age of 14, and discovered something about my father. Let me first say that conversational intelligence is hardwired, and it's the learnable ability to connect, navigate, and grow with others, a necessity in building healthier and more resilient organizations in the face of change. And conversational intelligence begins with elevating the level of trust that you create with others. You cannot open up without a feeling of trust with other people, or if you do not have the voice that you need to fully connect. It ends with the quality of the interactions and conversations that result. We also now know, and I believe, that we can't learn what we're doing. We can't solve all of our problems at the same level of thinking that we used when we created them. So as I began to understand what conversations mean, I had to go back to the moments of contact where I saw amazing, miraculous, magical things happen, and where I captured those moments and turned them into wisdom, which I'll share with you now. The first, as I said, was the stuttering of my father. What I knew about my dad as I got older was that he was a great orator, that he could speak in multiple languages, and that he went to the government as a dentist, and he said, I want to bring dentistry around the world. So my take on my dad was that he was this extraordinary person that I was quite impressed with. However, what I learned is that my dad was a stutterer when he was younger. And what I learned is that something happened in a conversation he had with a teacher that transformed his life to become the person that I came to admire as I saw him go around the world and bring dentistry around the world. What I learned is that my dad was a twin, that his sister had water on the brain, and that my grandmother actually favored the little girl. She said she always wanted girls. She ended up with twins. The little girl died when she was 5 and a half. But my father's job was to push the carriage around to keep her while she was being kept alive. My father didn't have an identity. My father didn't have a sense of self, and my father became a stutterer because he didn't have a secure connection with my grandmother. He lived through his life until he was in the last year in high school, being a stutterer, and he stutters so bad that he really couldn't speak. Stutterers, we know, develop an extraordinary auditory recall, and my dad had the kind of recall for things that enabled him to actually learn 7 languages self-taught, so he could do the things that he wanted to do. But here's the moment that made the difference for my dad. He had a teacher that believed in him. He had a drama teacher who said, I want to make you a star in the play. He brought, and if any of you have seen The King's Speech, you know a little bit about what this is all about. She worked with my dad and worked with my dad until he was able to step into a new identity and be able to go in front of an audience and speak without stuttering. It was the most miraculous thing, and when I heard that story, I wanted to find out what happened in that conversation, what transpired between the two of them that enabled my dad to go into such an incredible place in his life. And so what I did is I found out that when you have, this is the neuroscience of it, when you help create a new identity inside of you, when people help you take on a new identity, and that identity can start by getting a new job and getting a new title and getting a new role, where you have a place that you can step into that's an aspirational place. What happens in your brain, in fact, is that these identities and new identities can give you a new voice, because it gives you a new way to let go of things from the past and create something new. And so I started to understand that there's something about the brain. In fact, I used to take my dad's dental books, medical books, and read them. I'd go under the bed and hide, and he'd say, what are you reading all that stuff for? And he said, that's about crazy people. And I said, no, it's about crazy people. It's about us. It's about human beings. I want to learn more about them. And so this began my quest. But what I learned wasn't enough just from the stuttering, but it was something I held in place, and I had to find more. What I learned, by the way, which I'll give you a visual for this, is that conversations activate changes in human beings. We now know that whatever DNA we are born with, we have discovered that we have other types of genes in us that are encoded to be impacted by the environment. That means 50% of our genes are designed so that we have an impact by others. And that impact is what you have as teachers. That's impact what you have as spouses. That's impact that you have as parents, influencing the ability for us to go beyond our given DNA and to expand into bigger and better human beings. We now know that conversations can activate our fear networks or our trust networks. We now know that when we feel excluded, judged, and limited, our activation of the fear networks happens almost instantly. We now know that when we feel included, appreciated, and expanded in the world, that it activates our trust networks, and trust is needed for people to communicate and connect to each other. We also know then that when the fear networks are activated, it's fight, flight, freeze, and appease. And we also know that it pulls the energy down to our lower brain, and we lose our voice. We lose our capacity to think creatively. We lose our capacity to think strategically. Yet, when people include us and appreciate us, and reach out to connect to us, and listen to connect, not to reject, and ask questions for which they don't have answers and we don't have answers, so we can begin to think together as great wisdom seekers. Something happens in the brain, and it happens in here, and it happens in here. So what we want to do is learn how to down-regulate the fear networks and up-regulate the trust networks. The second most important experience I ever had was when I worked at an orphanage. I got pulled to work into the orphanage when I was 16 years old, going to school, and something just pulled me in. I'm sure you've had those experiences where something just pulls you in and you know you need to be there. And so there were girls, 30 girls in the orphanage. I would go every day after school. I'd spend 3 to 4 hours with them and help them in some way. I didn't know exactly how I was helping them. Now, for some of you who know, when you're in an orphanage, your direct connection from your original parents is not there. Hopefully, the orphanage provides you with the safety and security to begin to build another identity, a new person. But these girls, some of them were only getting D's in school. And I was there for 3 months, and then the headmistress called me in and she said, "I need to talk with you." Now, how many of you get that, "I need to talk to you"? That means there's something wrong, you did something wrong. And she looked at me straight in the eyes and she said, "How did you do it?" And I said, "How did you do what?" And she said, "How was it that when you came here, the girls were getting D's, and now they're getting A's and B's? What's going on?" It turned out that I wasn't teaching them anything about their courses. I must have been doing something that connected me to them in a way that they hadn't had in a long time. I must have been doing something that was about appreciation and expanding and about making people feel important in their life. Whatever it was, I learned at that point that there's something about the connection between human beings that we can't take for granted, that while we can't see it, it's something powerful that has an influence on us all the time. This is Candace Pert, who passed away last year, unfortunately, but she was a neuroscientist, and she said, "We're not just hunks of meat. We're vibrating like a tuning fork. We send out a vibration to other people. We broadcast and we receive. Thus, the emotions orchestrate the interactions among all our organs and all our systems." And so I wanted to find out more. I spent some time with the HeartMath Institute, which is out in California, and I learned some things as I learned more about the heart-brain connection and the communication, that the heart has its own complex nervous system called the heart brain. The heart sends far more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart, and the heart signals affect the brain centers involved in decision-making, creativity, and emotional experience. So we can't take for granted when we walk into rooms thinking that just because I have a lot of knowledge to share, that I've done my job as a teacher or as a parent or as someone who's trying to help others grow by using all the wisdom that we have, that there's something else that has to take place in the relationship we have with others that creates that foundation for greatness to emerge. I took one more step into this amazing mystery about how the brain works and about how we can learn to amplify our understanding. I got involved in a project called the Talking Typewriter when I was doing my fellowship at Drexel University. And we did something that not only was an experiment, but ended up with a 10-year longitudinal study that changed the way people started to think about conversations. And this is what we did. GE gave us a talking typewriter. It was a $70,000 commitment on their part to build this room that children could go in. It had a big typewriter, but it also had a computer so that you could program the content of what the kids were learning. And my professor, who was quite amazing, Doreen Stegg, who had a philosophy major and a psych major, along with her husband, said if we could create environments that were unusually non-judgmental, and we enabled kids to learn how to read in those environments, I wonder what the impact would be on their lives. And so we taught for 6 months, we learned for 6 months to spend time learning how to capture the stories that the kids were creating and the stories in writing about what they were saying in their stories. And we programmed these typewriters. And we never forced them to go into the typewriter, but we actually left the door open. And by the end of 2 months, we had every kid asking to go into the typewriter. Within 31 half-hour sessions, each of the children learned how to read and learned how to write from their own stories. It turns out that what was happening again was what's going on in the brain, that we were activating the part of the brain, not just the neocortex, but we were activating the prefrontal cortex. It turns out that we did a study, and by the way, we were lowering the lower brain, which is the brain that has the fear in it. By being in a non-judgmental environment and using the stories and pictures that these kids had created, they went on to validate their view of the world in a way that we had never seen before. The kids' IQs went up because we retested them, 15 points in each child. That's unheard of, unheard of. And then we followed them for 10 years to see how they did in school. And each of these kids were able to go on to college, like your story of how many kids go on to college. They went on to college. They all were emotionally sophisticated in their classrooms, and they became leaders in their communities. So what is going on? How does this have any impact, and what does this have to do with what you're doing in this room? How do we understand better the things that we do to activate the fear networks? How do we understand better the things that we do to activate the trust networks? How do we reframe and refocus and redirect and move people into what we call from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 conversations? Because we now know that level 3 conversations are conversations that open up our capacity. It triggers the DNA, our capacity to influence the environment and to create new things and co-create things that have never existed in the world before. I'm almost done my stories. Can you hang in for another one? Worked at a Best Stone Center, which is with adults that had disabilities. These are the people that I work with. Same picture, it's up on the web. The day I joined to work there, I was greeted by a woman, Mary Jean Snegas, who wanted to introduce me to Larry, who was standing right next to me. Larry was 24 years old. He's up in the top, the guy with his head tilted over to his side. And Larry, I was told when I met him, was 24 years old with the brain of a 2.5-year-old. And as I watched this introduction, I watched Larry go like this and like this, as though he was hearing everything, even though I was told he couldn't speak. And I decided Larry was going to be my experiment. And so I followed Larry around and watched everything he did. I watched that he loved to watch the person to clean the floor. I loved to watch the fact that he took the silver tops out of the ketchup bottles and put it on a clothespin and hold it up and try to see behind himself in the mirror. I loved that he was fascinated by the world around him, even though he didn't have the words to speak about them. And I said, I have to understand how to bring someone out of Larry, that identity that needed to be born out of Larry. And so I watched that he liked to have the floor polished. Somebody came in every day. And so I said, Larry, would you like to polish the floor? And he said, yes, yes. And so I gave Larry the floor to polish. And every day, Larry would take out all the equipment and polish the floor, and he became the best floor polisher that anyone had ever seen. And after he was good at this, he asked to go outside, and he wanted to do something outside, and he wanted to vacuum the outside. He wanted to cut the grass, and he became the grass cutter. So Larry defined himself in a new way through these experiences that he had. What happened short amount of time at the Best Stone Center was quite amazing because I noticed that everyone watched Larry and everyone wanted to be someone new. And so everyone started to ask in their own way for what they could do. And they showed me sometimes by sitting out and down at the piano and playing the piano. So Bertha became the piano player. And Alfred became money in my pocket. He wanted to take the money to the store to buy food for everybody. Everybody wanted to do something because something happened, the chemistry shifted in that organization that changed their lives. It turned out that I started to post things about them, their health and other things, just to keep track of what was going on. Everybody lost weight. Everybody started to speak up and ask to do things that they'd never thought of before. They wanted to connect to the outside world, which they had never done before. Pretty soon they had a project that they wanted to do, which ended up in the newspaper, to make something for one of the other schools with young children who were somewhat disabled as well. And so I realized that something happens when we release that energy for when we release that energy for transformation. Something happens that goes well beyond the experiences that we're having now to activate not only something internally because they became healthier and smarter and more expressive, but something shifted in the world around them so that they were influencing each other in positive ways. What I'd like to do is ask you to take a minute and turn to somebody next to you. Introduce yourself if you haven't yet met, and come to the question of, what does this mean for us? What do these examples and stories have to do with things that we can take away starting tomorrow that might have an impact on our lives and the lives of people around us? Spend a few minutes talking to your partners. Okay, I'd like to ask you to close down your conversations. Take a minute and finish your conversations. Here's a time where you, I know you each talked to some people sitting next to you and captured some insights amongst you. What you were doing while you were talking to each other is stimulating oxytocin. Anybody know what oxytocin is? Yeah, it's not just something that women have when they're nursing babies. That's what they used to think it was. It turns out that there are a lot of neuroscientists that have been studying this incredible neurotransmitter. Oxytocin is the most wildly produced neurotransmitter hormone in the body. And oxytocin is what creates bonding. Oxytocin is what enables people to feel trust with each other and open up to each other. And the more we learn how to do this, the more that heart-brain connection to the prefrontal cortex gets stimulated, and the more we are able to access wisdom that we hold inside, wisdom that maybe we didn't even know that we held inside. And so what I'd like to do is actually capture, we have a couple of mics here, and I'd love to hear from some people, anybody, who found that there was an implication for what I just talked about in something that they could use moving forward in their life, some insight that struck them. And I want to lower the bar to say, everything you say is perfect. So is there anybody that was stimulated and would like to share? And you don't need to get up, you can stay in your seat. If you can do it that way, that's great. Okay. There, I see some hands that just picked up over there. Now tell me you were just moving your coat around and you really didn't want to come. You weren't going to bid on that $1 million prize, were you? Is there anybody that really got excited and actually started to think of something? Yep, over here, perfect.
I thought it was very interesting when I was looking around and watching that we are actually, when I get on the elevator, we are on level 3. We are on level 3.
Oh, yes!
And I thought, connectors.
Connectors.
You know, I think that's very, very powerful. That may be why you felt those heart palpitations.
Maybe that's what it was. I'll buy that. Yeah, awesome, awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Is there anything that somebody else would like to add to the story? Something that you thought about, please.
We were wondering, because we said how sometimes when you meet people, what happens if you get that negative vibe but you don't want to stay there? Is there a process we can learn to turn that trigger off? Because, you know, that could be a missense, and then pretty soon you start treating that person differently. So right away, that's what we kind of went to. It's like, oh, so many good things, and then if you misread somebody and you don't want to be negative.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What we now know, Angelica DeMoca, who's with the Fox School of Business at Temple University, has done a lot of research in this work of trust and distrust in the brain. There's so much going on right now about that lower brain and upper brain. You could read it in every magazine, newspaper. But what she's learning is, first of all, that you can get that negative vibe, which is the fear, distrust, but your brain can also have a feeling for trust. You can do both, which nobody knew before. It's either trust or distrust. So you can get both vibes, but you're going to pick up the lower one first, and it trumps a lot of other feelings. So if you let it trump, and then you become taken over by that chemical reaction, you will then start to stimulate more of that in yourself, and you'll probably pull away. Okay? Now, if you sense this person has a gun in their pocket or something like that, then you probably want to, you know, that could be something that you'd want to listen to and run as fast as you can out the door. If it's somebody that you're just meeting for the first time, sometimes the lower brain also triggers because you're feeling power in another person and you're not quite sure whether you have what it takes to connect to them. So we don't fully know because this part of the brain messages us in 0.07 seconds, much quicker than we can put sense to it, and it causes us to start to pull back pretty quickly. So we may need to take a little time, quell ourselves, and you say to yourself, take a breath, like I said, breathe in and breathe out. When you do that, it quells the brain enough to allow other messaging to come in about that person so that you can call the judgment call a little bit more secure. But we do have that capacity to pick it up, and it does often cause us to get upset and get agitated. When you get your amygdala stimulated, you just need to know this, or when you stimulate it in somebody else, and it's a high level of activation. It's called an amygdala hijack. It can last for 26 hours. It has a shelf life of 26 hours when it's a real bad one, when it's a real bad hijack. And when it does that, it does close the prefrontal cortex. So you can find yourself not as able to make sense of situations. You find yourself not as able to respond the way you normally respond to things. And you say, God, I'm not myself. How many of you have said, I'm not myself from these kind of situations? That's part of what you're experiencing, yourself, because some of this identity is in this part of the brain. And you start to, it pulls you back. And sometimes it even pulls us back to when lower times in our life, interestingly enough. And we start to bring out behavior that was old behavior or habit patterns that we used to do because the new behavior patterns are less accessible to us. Does that make sense? Yeah. Other questions or anywhere? Now, there's 850 people in this room. There's got to be at least one other person who has the courage. We're going to give you a free book if you raise your hand. How many hands are going to, come on. Is that, I see somebody over there? Yes, great.
Well, one of the things we talked about in a Catholic school, you know, there's religious education, and I teach a morality course, and so I was mentioning that a colleague who's sitting somewhat near me had mentioned that it's really important in a morality course not to focus on morality as a subject where you can start categorizing people and judging them and but it's more about like developing, you know, patterns of behavior and virtues or good habits and things like that. So I thought that was kind of an interesting reaffirmation of what you had said of something one of my colleagues told me in August or September. So
I think it's wonderful, and the more we talk about this in big groups and the more we bring together neuroscience and theology and neuroscience and education, the more we understand that there's a match there. What you're talking about is a big match. And by shifting it from it being people that are defective in some way to the behaviors that we all can learn to cultivate is a huge leap forward by refocusing. So some of the things that you'll learn about in conversational intelligence is refocusing, redirecting, and reframing. And as we begin to hear, here's a takeaway for you to practice. As you begin to hear people in conversations using the language that you can now tell, trigger yourself because you feel it, or trigger others because you feel it. Learn to practice reframing that conversation and saying, well, what if we looked at it this way, which all of a sudden gives us a freedom to have a better conversation about it. Awesome. Somebody else on that side. There's somebody right back there.
I'm wondering if you could comment on reaching children who have been abused and where that negative and, you know, that distrust is going to come up automatically or very quickly, how to connect with them.
Oh my goodness, that's a 3-day conversation. However, I had the opportunity to be a teacher right after I got my fellowship for 6 boys who were really, really distressed and had grown up with a lot of trauma and couldn't function in a public school system. And so I was asked to create a program for them. And I only had 3 months with them because I met my husband, had 3 dates, and decided to get married and move to Kansas, which is absolutely an incredible thing to do. But we're still together, so I knew you had to hear that part. But what I learned in working with them was that they needed to feel trusted. They needed to feel validated. They needed to feel not broken, because the labels that had been given to them were so much about what they weren't, that stepping into conversation with others always brought up for them the fear that somebody else will tell them that they weren't good enough. And I had to begin to build that relationship with them, which was judgment-free, that was reaching out to find the best inside of each of them, just as I had learned to do in the projects that I was working with in my school. And you cannot believe what happened. One of the big projects I did before I left, none of them had been readers. And I read Catcher on the Rye to them and asked them to identify with the characters and see themselves in the characters, to try to build that part of the brain that gave them a new identity. And I had them, some of them couldn't understand history because they couldn't get into the words. So I had them draw pictures of history. And all of a sudden it activated some of them. So I started to trust that if I could open up more of them in ways where they felt non-judgmental, or I felt it started to activate some of their brain again. And I took them to the library the last week that I was there, and I said, I'd like you to pick out a book. And it took a lot of them a long time because none of them had ever read a book. They'd only read comic books. And I said, pick out the book. 5 of them picked out a book, and then the last one wasn't able to do it, and everybody wanted to leave. And I said, hang on, everybody start reading your books. we're going to take our time. And I said to the little boy, who wasn't that little, he was 16 years old, I said, go for the book that hits your heart, not your head. Go for the book that makes you feel something inside in your heart, and you'll know which one it is. And he walked around, and all of a sudden he saw a book and his heart started to beat, and he grabbed it and he said, this is it. And he took the book home, and he didn't stop reading it. And when he came back on Monday, he had read this whole book, a big, fat book. He had never read more than a comic book before. And so somebody believed in him. And this activated him, that he could do it. I went to Kansas, and in 6 months, I got a gift. And the gift came from Michael, this young boy. And it had Sisyphus in it. Some of you know Sisyphus is this young story about this man who pushed the rock up the hill. And he said, I'm in a private school. You believed in me. I am now the best reader. I am now the best thinker. He said, and I love myself. What a beautiful thing to hear from a child. When we believe in people, we help them grow to become so far beyond what they ever thought they could be. I don't know how much time we have left. You have to tell me. 15 minutes? Okay, I wanted to show you 2 actual videotapes of conversational intelligence in action. One in a kindergarten and one in a high school, so that you can begin to take in and breathe in the power of this. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this to work because I haven't had great success using my equipment so far. So let me see if this will work. This is the kindergarten if it works. Whoops.
What would you guys say to teachers if they're not getting high quality work? Could they learn something from this, and what would you say to them that they could do differently in their classrooms?
This is a story called Austin's Butterfly, and it's a true story about a first grade boy, and his name is Austin, and he goes to school, or used to go to school, in a town called Boise, Idaho. And in his class in Boise, Idaho, they were studying butterflies, and he had to do a project. His job in first grade was to draw a butterfly, and this is the butterfly that he picked. Austin had to use this photograph as his model, and he had to draw an accurate scientific drawing of this butterfly. This is called a tiger swallowtail.
I knew it!
Can you tell Toby why it's called tiger?
Because it kind of has the stripes of the tiger right there.
Good. So here was Austin's job. He was supposed to do a scientific drawing of that butterfly. But remember, Austin was only in first grade. And you know what he did? He forgot to look like a scientist carefully. He got his paper and he just started to draw the image of a butterfly that he had in his head. And he wasn't looking like a scientist, and so this is what he drew.
Whoa.
It's not bad, and it is a butterfly, but does it look exactly like this?
No.
No, it doesn't yet. It doesn't look exactly like this yet. And so they didn't look at this and say, good, Austin, you're done. They said, Austin, good start. Now we can start giving you critique so you can do a second draft and make it better, and a third draft and make it better, and you can make it much, much closer to this. And he was ready to go. All of the first graders in his critique group sat on the floor like you guys are, and they decided to split their advice into 2 kinds. First, just the shape of the wings. And then when the shape was right, they'd give him advice about the pattern inside the wings. Alia, what would you say?
You can make it much pointier.
Good. These wings could be much pointier. Who else would add something? Atak, what would you say?
About the angle, because not to be mean about
Yes.
the angle, it's just not exact, so...
Okay, so show me. Come on up here, Atak. Show me what you would ask him to do slightly differently.
Like to make it a little longer,
Longer where? Draw where you would do it.
right there.
Okay, so pull this out longer.
Yeah.
That's very specific, Atak. Thank you. Jamila, what would you say?
It's like triangle?
Good. Jamila, I love that. So you're saying more like a triangle shape. And I agree. Well, you know what? Those first graders came up with most of those same ideas. And you know what Austin said? He said, okay, I'll go try. And he went back to his seat and he drew this.
Wow.
Does this look more like a triangle? Yeah. Did he go out further, like Atak was suggesting?
Yes.
Did he add some jaggedness here,
Yes.
like Cindy? Did he get rid of that bottom thing?
Yes.
So he did listen to his friends, and he made it better. It's not perfect. Toby, what would you say?
I'd say don't put those little tail things so pointed in. I'd say put them more pointed down.
Good. Okay, Ethan, what would you say?
I think you should make the wings like this, not like this.
Okay, he listened to his friends, and they said, this is really a lot better, Austin. That second draft really is better.
Yeah, maybe you can make a third one.
Good, maybe he could make a third draft. And so he did this draft.
That's his third draft.
That's his third draft, Hadley. That's just right. Elijah, what do you notice there?
Well, one wing's more pointed than the other, and that side is a little bit higher than the others.
Good. Coburn?
Right here, it doesn't have the inside thing still.
Ah, okay. Needs a little bit more of that notch. So, do you think maybe he should do a fourth draft?
Yeah.
Well, that's just what he said. He said, shoot, okay, I got round again. I'll go back and do a fourth draft. He listened. Does it look more even like Elijah was suggesting?
Yes.
Yeah, and does it look like it's coming out a little sharper, like Cindy was suggesting? And like Attack was saying, it's a little, the angle looks a little better. So now Austin was feeling really good. He said, am I ready to add some pattern? And they said, okay, why don't you try adding some of the pattern? And he did.
He's good at it. He is so good.
And then they said, Austin, you're ready for color. Let's look at his last draft. And what do you think? Did it come out really good?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about how much progress he made? And Tak, what would you say about his progress?
He made like a lot of progress. He persevered doing it. His friends were honest with him.
What was it about the kinds of advice that they gave that allowed him to get better each time? Hassan?
Well, they told him what was wrong about it.
Did they say it's just wrong, or were they more specific?
They were more specific, but they weren't mean about it.
Great. Hadley?
He made 6 drafts.
And so is that something that other kids should learn from? What should we learn from that?
We can make other drafts if it's not right.
Good. So if it's not right, you can keep doing more drafts to make it better.
You just don't use things in your head. You want to use a sharp eye.
Good. He used the eyes of a scientist. Great.
Keep in mind, this is a first grade child being able to do that extraordinary picture of a butterfly. Think about the kind of conversations that they had in that room and the kind of conversations that must have taken place with that child in the room experiencing that, and how that opened his ability to figure something out that he had never done before and do it with that level of clarity, specificity, and beauty. Imagine how we support or don't support the children that we're working with or the friends that we're trying to help. What's the language that we use to activate the part of our brain that has us become so confident that we can step out into the world and take the world on and take on challenges that we'd never had before? What are the things that we're doing through conversation that help us build that type of identity and those types of relationships? I have one more, only 3-minute clip to show you in high school when if we imagine that we were giving people this support throughout their life, what it might look like. So, let me share with you first. A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality. So I need to jump to the next place in my slides. Now you're looking at my desktop, and I hope you're not remembering that part of this. Okay, high school, conversational intelligence, deep learning, what happens?
I was looking at myself from outside of myself. By that, I mean I was examining my life in a new lens, being metacognitive, thinking about my thinking.
the main thing that unites deeper learning across the country is this belief in the capacity of students to do more than we expect they could.
Quotes, quotes, quotes. They emphasize your point.
It's this willingness to push kids deeper and let them struggle to do more.
Hello, Renaissance. How you doing on this beautiful Tuesday?
I could argue that Lady Macbeth also showed a lot of growth.
Deeper learning is really helping kids feel smart.
1, 2, 3, Phoenix! Perseverance, at least to me, is mental.
I didn't get it.
So you were completely stuck.
I do let them struggle. I do that a lot.
It lets me create a relationship with the teacher.
And that courage to speak up, to me, is very much at the heart of deeper learning.
By sometimes removing oneself from the environment, reflecting on the experience, you gain more perspective on it, and you're able to see things that are brought to light. You are able to make adjustments to whatever you're thinking or doing easily because you understand how and why it occurs that way.
When you're 18 and you're told that that you have the opportunity to speak in front of 400 kids and share your wisdom of the last 7 years, that's a thing that you will never forget for the rest of your life.
You adapt, you survive, and you thrive. You find hidden meanings and are able to finally gain an understanding of yourself like no other. But in order to do so, you must understand who you define yourself to be. And at this point in my life, I finally feel like I do. I am Edward Faustino Brown. I'm saying hello to a future that they have prepared me for these past 7 years that I've been working towards, that they've been along with me every single step of the way. And that journey is going to be at Brown University.
As the first Ivy League graduate of this school, I think Edward Brown is destined for great things. He is a living example of perseverance. I think that deeper learning is everywhere, but it's hidden in most places, and our job is to sort of cultivate it. It's a team effort, and it's a team success. So it's a different paradigm of schooling. Deeper learning is the key for us to build a better world.
I have incredible expectations of myself. Whoever said that there was anything wrong with it, this is my version of the American dream. Like many great men and women before me, I'm here to stake my claim in this land, on this earth, and in this universe. But if I am to get all these things done in one lifetime, I had better start now, and this is just step one.
Every human being is born with a place that they're going to be on this planet that makes them special and unique. Each one of us sitting out here in the audience is someone who has invested a lot in bringing their aspirations to life. And if we can remember that every conversation has the ability to either cascade us forward into those dreams or hold us back, perhaps the way we think about conversations might change in our life. My daughter wrote this poem for me to read to all of you. I had to promise that I would. She's now a lawyer and an inventor and doing amazing things. This was written at 11 and a half to speak to the adults in the world that she was growing into. There once was a boy with a dream all his own, to fly to the moon and invent his own phone. He had such big dreams that spread far and wide that nothing could hold them because they came from inside. Then one day the boy's thoughts started to stray. All he wanted was a job with high pay, and all those dreams that he had collected were no good now and simply rejected. As time passed, the man got older. He sat for long whiles, getting much less bolder. He didn't walk much, for because when he did, his bones creaked loudly, not much like a kid. And then one day, while sitting in his chair, the man remembered the very, very rare dream that he had known while around the age of 10, and suddenly the man became a young boy again. Each of us has the power to bring out our aspirations and dreams. Think about each conversation in a new way every day, and watch what happens to the world around you, and watch what happens to yourself. It's quite like magic. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. I'm Mark Myers. I'm the Dean of the College of Social Sciences, Health, and Education here at Xavier, and I'm between you and the parking lot, and I realize that. I want to give you guys a quick homework assignment because it wouldn't be educational unless we had a homework assignment. And My mom was, a lot of you guys know me, my mom was a Catholic school teacher, and she's the reason why I do what I do. And she gave me a lesson that I want to share with you guys because it connects exactly with the message that we got here today. And that I asked my mom why she did it, because I saw all the reasons why you shouldn't be a teacher when I was a kid growing up around the school. And I saw hundreds of reasons why you should never teach children. But for me, she said, it's because I get paid in light bulbs. And I looked at her with that 6th grade look and said, what? You get paid in light bulbs? And she said, every day, every kid gets it. And when that light bulb goes on, that's why I'm there. My mom was the best teacher I ever had. She also gave me the worst grade I ever got in my life. But that light bulb quote keeps me going every day. And I want to share something else with you guys on the way out. The bishop started us with a prayer, so I'd like to end with one from one of my favorite authors, and his name's James Martin, and he's a Jesuit priest. And he wrote a new serenity prayer that I'd like to share with you guys today on our way out today. So bow your heads for a moment with me. God, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, which is pretty much everyone, since I'm clearly not you, God, at least not the last time I checked. And while you're at it, God, please give me the courage to change what I need to change about myself, which is frankly a lot, since once again, I'm not you, which means I'm not perfect. It's better for me to focus on changing myself than to worry about changing other people, who, as you'll no doubt remember me saying, I can't change anyway. Finally, give me the wisdom to sometimes just shut up whenever I think that I'm clearly smarter than everyone else in the room, that no one knows what they're talking about except me, or that I alone have all the answers. Basically, God, grant me the wisdom to remember that I'm not you. Amen. Thanks for being here today. Drive home safely and have a great night.
Welcome to Xavier University for the 10th